What's going on, YouTube? So right before we get started, don't forget to click like and subscribe, and also don't forget to check out the merch store, and also add me on my Instagram when you have the chance. So with all that out the way, Nikon Z6ii versus the Nikon Z9. I've been getting a lot of requests through my Instagram about this particular comparison, and I thought the Nikon Z6ii was completely done on the channel. I did so many reviews about the Z6ii and Z9. I mean, you're comparing the flagship versus Z6ii. So let's just get the big elephant out the room. Let's look at the price. Yes, it's about $2,000 on a Z6ii. I think the price will drop eventually, of course. It fluctuates here and there. And the Nikon Z9 is what, $5,500 roughly. And so that's about 3,500 USD of a difference. So at this point of the video, I mean, get what you can afford, right? Because we're comparing a flagship. So yeah, just put it that way. You could cut the video now, you can move on to the next video or whatever, but that's the biggest difference. So there we go. Now moving right along, let's take a look at the weight. The weight of the Z9 is almost twice the amount of weight of the Z6ii. So we're looking at 1,340 grams versus 705 grams. And just for some quick specs on the Z9, you're looking at a 45 megapixel at 20 frames per second with 493 face detection. And also it goes from negative 6.5 to positive 19 EV. So definitely low light autofocus. Well, actually, we need to look at the Z6ii before we can say anything. Anyways, 8K, 4K, released in 2021 around December. I always complain it should have been January 2022, but I mean, who releases a camera at the last week of December? I mean, that's mental. People are on vacation, aren't they? And as for the Nikon Z6ii, you're getting a 24 megapixel, 14 frames per second. Also, you're getting 273 face detection. 273. Just keep that in mind. Compare with the Nikon Z9, it's almost twice as much as on the Z9 than the Z6ii. And also, you get the negative 4.5 to plus 19 EV, and that just means that the Z9 is a lot better than the Z6ii, obviously. So there we go. And without the external monitor, internally you get your 4K 1080p. This camera came out roughly around fall of 2020. So there we go. Now let's take a closer look at the video specs, and obviously these specs will sing to some viewers out there that are planning to buy one or the other. I mean, if you plan to do 8K video recording and RAW, definitely get your Z9 if you can afford it, but definitely Z6ii is no slouch. You could do normal YouTube, TikTok, Instagram videos with this 4K camera. So there we go. And moving right along, let's take a look at the back of the camera. As you can see, both cameras, the Nikon Z9 and the Z6ii, they sport a 0.5-inch EVF with a 3,690,000 dots, 100% coverage, so they're more or less the same. But hold that thought, we'll take a look at more detail on this. Now, the 3.2-inch screen, more or less the same, of course. It's the same thing, except the flip part. The flip part. Definitely the Z6ii has the tilting touchscreen, whereas the Nikon Z9 has the 4-axis tilt and touchscreen. Now, let's take a deeper look at the EVF. Now, here's a deeper dive on the EVF. This is from the Nikon website, obviously. Now, the Nikon Z6ii, it sports a 11 manual brightness control, whereas the Nikon Z9 sports a 16 level brightness control. And also the diopters, the Nikon Z9, it's slightly better than the Z6ii. It's negative 4 to plus 3, whereas the Nikon Z6ii is negative 4 to plus 2. So that's just something for you guys to definitely take note of if you're, wearing shades, glasses. I'm sorry, glasses, just like me. Why did I even say shades for? Now, as stated before, the Nikon Z9 came roughly around December of 2021. It has the BSI, it has the IBIS, however, it has the XP7. Now, the Nikon Z6ii came out roughly around 2020. It has the BSI and IBIS as well. That's all standard nowadays. However, this is the dual XP6. Just keep that in mind. Now, in terms of battery life, the Nikon Z9 sports a EN-EL18D, which is 220 USD, and the Nikon Z6ii sports a EN-EL15C, which is $70. Now, some of you guys might be asking me, how long can you shoot before you have to charge again. And let me tell you guys, it varies, but I'm going to show you guys the Nikon website. But I don't want to say these numbers are correct, but at the end of the day, Z9 is going to give you more shots. Period. Now, in terms of memory slots, the Nikon Z9 sports 2 CF Express card, whereas the Nikon Z6ii sports 1 CF Express and 1 UHS 2 slot. And speaking about the card slots, let's take a listen on some frames per second test. Here is the Nikon Z9. Here's the Nikon Z6ii. And here is both of them on top of one another. And as you can clearly see, with the continuous high raw JPEG, the Z9 definitely shoots way better than the Nikon Z6ii. Nikon Z6ii even stops shooting somewhere in the middle. So with that said, Z9 is a lot advanced than the Z6ii, but that's if you are shooting sports and wildlife. So yeah, just keep all that in mind, right? So for the next section, here is the color test, and we're just gonna look at the color output between each cameras with the same setting, with the same lens. And as you can clearly see, color in general is more or less the same. Detail wise, I would honestly say you could kind of see more detail with the 45 megapixel camera versus a 24, obviously. But overall, color with the exact same lens, with the exact same settings, there's no difference. It looks the same to me. I can't tell the difference between one or the other. So that is pretty good. Now here is the playground scene. And even in this scene right here, in my honest opinion, for some reason, whenever time I shoot outdoors on a different day, the Nikon Z6ii seems to render their image slightly brighter than the Nikon Z9. And I just want to point that out. And we did see this in a previous test on my other Nikon Z6ii versus, I think it was a Z7 II or D850, I forgot which one, but this also came up as well, where the Nikon Z6ii seemed to slightly process the image a little bit brighter, just a little bit, not too crazy, right? Here's an indoor scene, and it looks like, leave your comments down below. I'd love to know what you guys think, but in all honesty, they all look more or less the same, but sometimes when shooting outdoors, the Z6ii is slightly a bit brighter, a little punchier, just a little bit, just a little hair. Indoors, more or less the same same thing. It looks just a slightly more punchier on the Z6ii. Now here's my ISO test. I downsampled the Nikon Z9, so just keep that in mind. Now here is ISO 100. Here's ISO 400. Here's ISO 800. Here's ISO 1600. Here is ISO 3200. Here's ISO 6400. Here's ISO 12800. And here is ISO 25600. Now for this next test, this is my dynamic range test. I essentially underexpose my shot as dark as possible, and I drag out the exposure, and we are going to compare which file collapsed while doing this. And as you can already see, wow, the Nikon Z6ii again seems quite bright when doing this test with the exact same settings. And let me tell you guys something, the splotchiness on the Z6ii is very it's not natural as a Z9. Z9 looks a lot natural. Yeah, that's it looks like a lot of artifacts going on, like little, oh my, you see the hot spots on the Z6ii, those dots? Yep, there we go. So that just tells me that Z6ii XP6 is kind of like over rendering the saturation of the files in the RAW, but the Z9, it feels very natural. There's nothing artificial, very organic. There's no splotchiness everywhere. It's pretty nice. And here's another test. We're outdoors. I'm just dragging out the exposure once again. And here we go. Let's take a look side by side. And as you can see, very interesting. The saturation on the Z6ii seems to be a tad brighter than the Z9, but if you take an even closer look, You can see the splotchiness on the Z6ii, whereas the Z9 seems to be very natural. Just like a very natural lift in the shadows. Sometimes you'll get those, you know, very artificial computer looking images. The Z6ii seems to be doing that versus the Z9. Z9 seems to be a lot natural. Look at the trees in the back. Yeah, there we go. But some people might prefer Z6ii, so yeah. Now here is the next test. We're outdoors shooting these trees, and I am going to show you guys the difference right there. Yeah, there's a lot of splotchiness of saturation all over the Z6ii when you're dragging out the dynamic range. It's not as natural as the Z9. It's very computer looking on the Z6ii, but definitely leave your comments down below. I would love to hear what you guys have to say, but I mean, saturation looks nice on the Z6ii, but the natural look is the Z9. Just keep that in mind. Now for this next test, this is the overexposure test. I may never do this again. I don't see a point of doing this, but there you go. I overexposed my shot and I try to bring back the details. Z9 will give you more details than the Z6ii, obviously, if you're shooting overly, overshot your shot. Yeah, if it was overly bright, it's almost pure white, you're pulling it back down. Z9 will give you slightly more details. So just wrap things up, the Nikon Z6ii versus the Nikon Z9, both cameras has their own pros and cons, but at the end of the day, I would have to say it depends on the end user, what you guys are looking for. What are you guys actually doing out there? Can you guys actually afford the Z9? Can you buy the Z6ii and buy 3 more lenses? It depends on the end user, right? Which one is the best? But from my test that I saw, I mean, let's just face it, pros and cons. There's more pros on the Z9 than the Z6ii. There's more cons on the Z6ii than the Z9. I mean, I think the only one pro that the Z6ii have that the Z9 don't have is the compact size. And as for the autofocus portion, I left that out in this video because obviously there are gonna be more updates on both cameras. But if you guys want to see the current autofocus conclusion, it's all on my Instagram. But aside from the actual human autofocus, let's talk about the animal tracking autofocus, which the Z6ii do not have. So I wish they do have the birding on the Z6ii, but they don't. I also wish they have the flicker free. Actually, you know what? Let's talk about this in another video because now I'm just complaining about the Z6ii. But at the end of the day, these are 2 different cameras, 2 different price tags. You got, you know, $2,000, $5,500. You pick your poison, you pick what you want. I think after doing this test, I think that the Z9 is definitely catered towards the professional levels, and the Z6ii is like a second camera to anyone that's owning like a DA50 or even a Z7 or a Z9. Definitely the Z6ii is no slouch as long as you give it the right exposure. The raw files, in my opinion, I like the raw files on the Z6ii on the default. I don't need to do a lot of tweaking. But when it comes to dynamic range push and pull, the Z9 takes the cake on that one. But of course, everyone has their own opinion. So definitely leave your comments down below because you're going to help someone else that's going to be watching this video and you will help them decide which one to get. So with all that said, thank you guys for checking me back. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Definitely click like and subscribe and I'll see you guys in the next one, all right? Take it easy. Peace. So now that all the viewers are gone, those are still watching this video, you're still watching me right now, I'm still talking, and it's probably like 20 minutes in or something. I just want to thank you guys, but this is my personal opinion between both cameras. I shoot mostly Z6ii because of the compact size to 24 megapixel files. Now, the Z9 is excellent. It's great. It's not for everyone. So if you're not in that market of carrying a big camera around, just don't get the Z9. It's extremely huge, but definitely pick up a Z7. Z7 might be the best way to go. Z7 Mark II actually. So, but the Z6ii is my personal camera, even though it did fail in the dynamic range test. And I just want to let you guys know, when I'm comparing these cameras, I don't have any horse in any model because I own them, I use them, they're just tools to me. But in the video format, I need to tell you guys, you know, what people want to hear, and obviously what people want to hear is the Z9 is the best camera. It is the best. It is the best Nikon camera on the market. But for my usage, is Z6ii and the ZFC. So that's what I typically use when I'm shooting photos out there. So I just want to point that out there. If you're a beginner, Z6ii is extremely good for you guys out there. If you're just a beginner, get the Z6ii, you should be fine. If you're doing a lot of videos, you know, 4K 24 is great. 4K 60, if you get the external monitor, is also great. But yeah, Z6ii is a flexible system, whereas the Z9, everything is there. You don't need an external monitor. Everything is kind of like, you know, all internal. So that's just a pro on the Nikon Z9. But if you're planning to get the Z6ii, definitely just, you know, get some good lens, and you should be good to go. And let me tell you guys, if you're this far in the video, when I was testing out the Z6ii versus Z9, people were pinging me afterwards, and they were like, Lee, Z6ii is better than Z9 autofocus. And I'm like, get out of town, man. Get out of town. No way it's better. And we did the testing live, no cuts. A lot of reviewers will do a bunch of cuts and talk about their feelings, and they'll sell you a book and this and that. I don't do that normally. I don't sell books or anything like that. I just sell my merch. But yeah, if you're selling a book about a Z9, obviously you will have to say Z9 is really good. If you make a manual book for Z9, you can't say Z9 sucks. If you make a manual book for Z6ii, you can't say Z6ii sucks. So with that in mind, the autofocus is pretty damn good on the Z6ii than the Z9. It seems to be more refined. Z9 needs more updates. I think, in my honest opinion, within maybe a next year, the Z9 will be extremely good. I think what Nikon did was they sold you guys an unfinished Z9, and they're planning to finish it 2 years down the road with all these firmware updates. So there we go. That's my take on it. But anyways, I want to thank you guys for still tuning in. So thank you guys again, and definitely take it easy, all right? Peace.